So we're going to do the bell ringers together. Letter A says find XZ. Why is there not a line above XZ? What does it mean when there's no line?
Length.
Yeah, so we're finding the length of XZ, of line segment XZ. So I'm writing that because I do have smart aleck kids who are like, look, Miss Marshall, I found XZ. Okay, that's now we're looking for. We're looking for the length. So what is my answer going to look like? I'm looking for a very simple answer. It's going to look like a number.
14 plus 1.
Which is a number. That's good. You good? You good? So for finding the full length of the line, one piece is 14, the other piece is 27. And what do we do with those numbers? We're going to add them to make it 41. Find CD. Find the length of CD. This time we are given the length of the entire line, which is 25. And then we have a piece of it, which is 19. What am I going to do with these two numbers to find CD? Subtract. So 25 minus 19 is 6. 6. It's okay. You're just wrong. It's fine. So we're going to talk about 1.3. We are going to do midpoint distance formulas, which you have done before, I think in algebra, but definitely done before. Before we do, we're going to learn some geometry words. So we're going to find segment lengths using midpoints and segment bisectors, use midpoint formula and the distance formula. I'm splitting this up into 2 days. Okay, we will be using the whiteboards with an activity, but first we're going to do some geometry. So first word is a midpoint. Where do they get the word midpoint from? The middle point. Good. So you're going to write, it's the point that divides the segment into two congruent segments. There's really no way to shorten it. You could shorten the word congruent, because we learned a symbol for congruent. What did the symbol look like? Squiggly with an equal sign. Okay, so instead of writing congruent, you could write the symbol. It is up to you. So it divides the line in half into two congruent segments. You see the word bisect, I believe, is on your paper, bisect. So you're taking biology class, yes? I would assume. What does it sound like in biology? Bisect sounds like dissect. What happens when you dissect? You cut something open, and we're just going to leave it there. So think of bisect. We're just going to think of bisect. You are cutting something. And then think of the prefix. If you were bilingual, that means you know 2 languages. So you're cutting something into 2 congruent pieces. So bisect, which is on your paper. You're cutting something into 2 congruent halves. So you're cutting something into 2 congruent halves. Cutting something into 2 congruent halves. Cutting something into 2 congruent halves. Yes, sir.
How does it pick you up when you walk away from it?
How does it pick me up?
Yeah.
Have you ever put your phone on speakerphone? Is that what you mean? The sound? There's a speaker right here.
Yeah. Like when you walk away, how's it hear you?
I just sound a little bit quieter. But I have a loud voice, so if you can hear me, this can hear me. Good question. I love you, Gage. This is exciting. What a time to be alive. Okay, this is the official definition. You don't have to write it down. You just wrote down the unofficial. To divide a segment or an angle into 2 congruent parts. You're going to hear the word bisect for the rest of geometry. Okay, so just remember that it sounds like what it is. Cut something in half. All right, and then we're going to talk about lines for 2 seconds. So the problem with geometry and the problem with students sometimes is you want to rely on what you see instead of what you know. But in geometry, you have to rely on what you know and what you're told. That makes sense? So in this picture, it looks like M is in the center, right? Which would make M the midpoint. But saying it looks like it's in the middle does not mean it's in the middle. Okay? What on this page tells me that M is in the middle?
The bottom.
Yeah, the bottom part. Why?
Because
it tells me M is the midpoint. Does everyone see it? So if it says flat out M is the midpoint, then it's in the middle. Perfect. Okay? The other way we talked about yesterday, does anybody remember what it was? How do we know if something was in the middle? What do you think? The red lines. Perfect. Good job. So the little congruent marks means that AM is the same length as MB, which means M is in the direct center. So if you see this, you don't have to be told that M is the midpoint. You will just know that it is the midpoint. That make sense? So you can either be told or you can have the tick marks. Okay, both are sufficient to tell you. All right, segment bisector. This is where we're going to talk a bit. You can write this entire definition as it is. A segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. And we'll talk about it. So, break apart the word. What did bisector mean? Cut something in half. Okay, what are we cutting in half? A line segment. Okay, so basically we're talking about what cuts a line segment in half. In this picture, what is the only thing that divides it into two halves? Don't overthink it. What's in the third center? M, which is the midpoint. So basically if it said name the segment bisector, you would say M. Capital M, because that's how you name a point. Okay. What you could also have, we're going to go in order. You could also have a segment. What does a segment look like?
Oh, a line with dots.
A line with two dots, right? Okay, give me a second letter.
E.
I chose Q. All right, so then what would the segment bisector be? How would I name this? MQ. And then what would the line above look like? Just a straight line. Okay? So you could have just a midpoint. You could have a line segment. You could have a ray. Okay? How can I change this line segment into a ray? Yeah, make one side an arrow, so I'm just going to do that. So I could have a picture that looks like this. This is a very popular one. Then what would I call the segment bisector? What would I name it? MQ, and then the arrow would point in which direction?
Right.
To the right. Okay? The last one would be a line. What would a line look like through the midpoint? Arrows on both sides. Okay, so then what would I name this? MQ, and then a line with two arrows. Okay? So you could have any of the above segment bisector. But basically all you're looking for is what cuts through the midpoint. If nothing does, what's my segment bisector here? M, the midpoint. Okay? But you might see this is a line. They already named it CD. Okay, so CD. You could name it many names. What else could we name this line? This segment bisector here? We could say what? Okay, DC. What else?
Line.
Nope. Just name two letters. DM. Why could we say DM when that's not the whole line? Look, it's D because it continues because of those arrows. Okay? So even though we didn't include the letter C, it's going to keep going past C and on and on and on. Does that make sense? So we could say DM. We could say MD. What else could we say? MC or CM. Okay? Both would work. All right? So those are segment bisectors. So in this section, this is on your page, it doesn't say identify the segment bisector, but we are going to, because it is important on your quiz and test next week. And then we're going to find the length. All right, so number one, what cuts this line in half? M. Okay, so we would write M. That answers the first portion of the question, identify the segment bisector. All right, for the second, we're finding the length of what part of the line? A to B, right? Okay, so we're only given a piece from A to M, and we're told it's 13. How can we find BM? What do we know?
13.
They're congruent. They're going to be the same. So then MB would also be 13. So then what's the length of the entire line? 26. And that's the answer. So AB is 26. All right, number 2. Okay, what cuts through the center of this segment? A ray. Okay, so keep in mind when I told you yesterday when two lines intersect, they're not going to put a dot between them. Okay, but you have to understand that this is a point, even though there's not a dot. Make sense? So this line segment, and the ray come together at M. M is a point. If you want to put a dot there to make yourself feel good, that's fine. But it is a ray. So what's the name of my ray going to be? MC. All right, and then AB, the length of AB is 8. Sorry, AM. Sorry, the length of AM is 8. So then what's the length of BM? 8. So the length of the full line is 16. I don't like when you two laugh. I never know what you're laughing at. Nothing. Number 3. What's cutting through the middle? A line. Okay. Can I name it like this? No, why not? L is not a point. Okay. I don't have 2 letters, so I can't name it this way. I would need a second letter. So what is the only way to name this line? Line L. All right, and then if MB is 26, what's AM? 26, so the whole line is 52. Okay, so each of you need a whiteboard. You're sharing the eraser. You guys will have to share with the people in front of you. I only have, I don't even have an eraser. Is what it is. So you need your whiteboard marker out?
Oh,
So your expo marker? Oops. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to answer these one at a time. When you've answered one, you raise your board. And I will tell you the first part's correct, the second part, whatever, okay? If I tell you both are correct, you move on to the next question, okay? All right, so how did we name our line over here? Line D. Look at that. Good job. All right, and then what's the length of AB? 30. All right, what did we name this type of line over here? ML, and it's a ray. It's okay. And then add 5.5 and 5.5, which makes 11. Perfect. So we're going to go back to our notes. So you're going to learn something and then do it on the whiteboards. And then learn something and do it on the whiteboard. You get the feel? All right, so this one is similar. You're going to use the same concept, except now what have we added in? We've added in algebra. Some algebra. It's okay. So here is what we know. Can someone read the directions to me? Go ahead, Jace.
point M is the midpoint of VW. Find the length of VM.
Perfect. So point M is the midpoint. Other than them telling me it's the midpoint, what else in this picture tells me we have the midpoint? The little lines, okay, the tick marks. Okay, so that tells me, these tick marks, it tells me that VM is equal to MW. Do we all agree? So what is the length of VM in algebra? Okay, tell us. Yeah, 4x minus 1. So we're going to plug that in for VM. And what is MW in algebra? 3x plus 3. We are exiting geometry class and entering algebra. Okay, so we have this little equation. I like to move the smallest x first. So where's my smallest x? 3x. So how do I move it to the other side? Subtract 3x. What is 4x minus 3x? X. So x minus 1 equals 3. What's my last step? Add 1, and x equals. Should I circle this answer?
Yeah.
No. What does it want me to find?
VW and then the length of.
Nope. What does it want me to find?
Length of
Wants me to find the length of VM. We're going to have to plug it in. VM is 4x minus 1. So we're going to plug it in for x. Plug x in for x. Plug 4 in for x. So what's 4 times 4? 16 minus 1 is, so VM is, that's the answer. You're my bright class, right? My bright and intelligent, my beautiful butterflies. Oh, what is a good way to check yourself in this problem?
Try the others.
Yeah, plug it in the other side. So if you plugged it into the other side, what number should we get? 15 as well, because they're the same measure. So you could plug it in 3 times, what did we say? 4. What's 3 times 4? 12 plus 3 is 15. So it's a very good way to check yourself. Plug it into both sides. We all make mistakes, so it is very good to check yourself. Okay? Questions on this one? If I asked for the length of VW, what would you tell me?
30.
It'd be 30. Yeah, VW. So there is a reason I tell you this. You're going to go back to your whiteboards. You're going to identify the segment bisector again, and then find ST. What do you notice about ST in both of these problems? It's the whole line. The last problem asked for VM, which was only half the line. So we plugged it in and we were done. The one that you're going to do, a lot of you are going to plug it in and then raise your board like that's the answer. But it's not the answer. I need the entire line. That make sense? So don't just plug it into one piece. You need to plug it into both. Okay? So you're going to do one problem at a time on your paper. Begin. What's a segment bisector in the first? MR. So MR and then arrows above. What did I get for X when I set them equal? I got 2. You plug it in, 2 plus 12 is 14. If you circled 14, that's not the full answer, okay? This side would also be 14. So what's the measure of ST? 28. Okay, both of those were your answer. The next one, what's my segment bisector? M. So you'd name M. After I set them equal, I get X equals 5. What do I do with that 5 gauge? I plug it back in. So I'd get 13 over here, 13 over here. So what's the full length of ST? 26. Okay, perfect. We're going to do some endpoints. We're going to do some midpoints. Sorry, not endpoints. We do have to start moving, okay? Because you guys are behind the other class. So think about this. Who do I want to pick on today? Jordan. Let's say Jordan gets, and we'll be nice. Let's say, well, not nice. Well, let's say Jordan gets an 88 on his first test. And then the next test he gets 72. How would you find the middle of these two numbers, the average of these two numbers, Jordan? Add them and divide by 2. Does anybody know what this is called? I think I just said it. It's the average. So you'd get 160 divided by 2. So the average would be an 80. Whenever you're finding the midpoint, you're taking the average of the x's and the average of the y's. Okay, so I'm going to write this up here so that we can refer to it in like literally 2 seconds. Because when I hit next, it's going to disappear. There's one point. There's another point. We're going to find the middle. Okay, so when you look at this formula, and don't look at it as something you dread and it doesn't make sense. You're adding the x's together and dividing by 2. We added his 2 test grades together and divided by 2. This is called averaging. So you're going to average the x's and average the y's. That makes sense? That's how you find the middle. So go ahead and write down the formula. You got x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. We do have to hustle a bit because you guys are behind. So your final answer will look like a coordinate point. X and Y, this will give us our midpoint. Okay, that's what the purpose of the formula is. Your answer will look like an X and a Y. They're two numbers. Okay, why do we have an X1 and X2? What does that mean?
Yes.
Yeah, two coordinate points. Good. So if you didn't finish writing it down, I'm going to write it down on this screen. X1 plus X2 divided by 2. Y1 plus Y2 divided by 2. Okay, what are my two X's that I'm going to plug in? 1 and 4. Try not to graph ahead. I'm going to show you why the graph's there. It's not normally going to be there. So we would add 1 plus 4 is 5. Can I reduce 5 over 2? No. You should reduce if you can. Like if you had 6 over 2, what does 6 over 2 reduce to? 3. If you had 16 over 2, does that reduce? Yes. So anytime you have an even number, you're going to reduce. All right, but 5 over 2, we're not going to reduce. We're going to leave it. What are my two y's that I'm going to plug in? Negative 3 and 2. So minus 3 and 2. What is minus 3 plus 2?
1. Negative 1.
Negative 1. Can negative 1/2 be reduced? No. So this is the final answer. That's it. I'm going to show you on the graph why it's the final answer. Okay? We are going to graph the points. My first point I'm going to graph is 1, negative 3. So at my origin, am I going to go left or right?
Already right.
To the right 1 and then down 3. So here's R. Starting at the origin, in order to graph S, I can speak. S, that's 4, 2. So I need to go left or right? To the right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up 2. Did I do that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then connect the dots to the best of your ability. It's good enough. All right, so we found the midpoint. What did we say the midpoint was? We just found it. 5 over 2, negative 1/2. So graphing this looks hard, but we're going to make this a little bit easier. What is 5 over 2 as a mixed number? 2.5. And then we're going to keep negative 1/2. So your answer, keep it as a fraction. Just leave it. Okay? But to graph it, I'm just showing you how we can graph it. So we're going to go over 2.5 and then go down 1/2. So starting at the origin, so we're going to go over 2, 1, 2, and 1/2. And then we're going to go down how much? 1/2. Hopefully your midpoint landed perfectly like mine did. Okay, does it look like it's in the middle? Yeah, it looks pretty good. So normally we'd start doing whiteboards, but we literally only have 5 minutes left, and we do not have time. Okay, my other class got to this piece, and this one is harder. Okay? This is example B. So tomorrow we'll go back and do more whiteboards, but today we got to do this. Okay? The midpoint of JK is 2, 1. So are we finding the midpoint? No, we're given the midpoint. One endpoint is 1, 4. Find the coordinates of endpoint K. Okay, so we're finding the other endpoint. We're still going to use the same formula, but we're going to break it apart. When I used x1 plus x2 over 2, what did this help me find? The midpoint, but what part of the midpoint? The x of the midpoint. So I use this, the x1 plus x2 over 2, to help me find the x of the midpoint. So I would write that down. We're going to split them, meaning we're not going to have two things in parentheses like we just did. We're going to make two equations. So I'll wait for you to write it down. We're going to do the same thing for the y of the midpoint. What did we use to find the y of the midpoint? y1 plus y2 over 2. Here's why we're doing this. Were we given the x of the midpoint? Yeah, we were. What is it? 2. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to plug it in. Plug it in right there. What did the two x's represent? These two x's. The x's of what? the endpoints. Do we have both x's of both endpoints? We have one of them, though. Which one do we have? We have one. We have this one. So we're going to use this. It's an x of one of my endpoints. Because remember, x1 and x2 are x's of my endpoints. All right, so then what am I missing from this? Yeah, my x2. So I'm missing my second x. Okay? Now we have an algebra problem. What's happening to 1 plus x? What is this 2 doing? It's being divided. So how do I get rid of it? I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Here's why. You cross cancel. This leaves. Okay? Then I have 2 times 2, which is 4. So 4 equals, now what's on my right side? 1 plus x. So then what do I do next to solve for x? Subtract 1, so then x equals 3. Okay, so of my endpoint, remember we're finding endpoint. What's my endpoint's name? I circled it earlier. K. So endpoint K. Of my endpoint K, I found the x coordinate, which is the number 3. Now I need to find the y. We're going to do the same thing, okay, except for with the y's. In order to have room, I have to shrink this. I'm going to shove it up in the corner, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing with my y's. What's the y of my midpoint? 1. So 1. What's a y of an endpoint that I have? 4. And then do I have my second y? No, I don't. So I'm just going to plug in a y. Okay, what do I do next? Multiply by 2, both sides. This gets rid of my denominator. So on the left, I have 1 times 2, which is 2. And on the right, I have 4 plus y. Okay. What's my last step? Subtract 4. So y equals -2. So my endpoint, my y is -2. This is my actual answer. We're going to graph it to show it. Okay? So we're going to graph each of our points. So my midpoint was 2, 1. My midpoint. My endpoint was 1, 4. Sorry, what did we call this endpoint? J. All right, and then my endpoint K, what is our endpoint? 3, -2. Okay, does it connect to make a perfectly straight line? Yes, is M in the center? Yes. So you won't graph every time. This is just to visually show you, okay? We're going to practice both tomorrow as well as do the distance formula. This is where we're going to stop.